Welcome to our home. My name's Father Dean Pinter. I'm the priest for St. Aidan Anglican Church here in Moose Jaw. Some of you may have been in our home before, in person. Some of you may have been here even remotely through some of our earlier Zoom services from this summer. If you've been here before, remotely or in person, welcome. We're just on the verge of Advent 2020. And every year with the parish, I try to do my best to prepare the parish for the new year, for Advent is the start of the Christian year. As I prepare, I'm always conscious that I'm sometimes battling uphill, that is against the culture to some extent. Because at this time of the year, particularly in a place like Moose Jaw, there's a lot going on for individuals and for couples and families. There's staff parties, plays, pageants, school Christmas parties. There's lots of food. There's a lot of events. People are busy. And normally to tell them Advent's a time for waiting and for watching, for anticipating the hopeful return of Christ, that can be a little bit of a difficult and countercultural sell. This year, I think 2020 has actually helped to prepare the ground in an unusual way. So tonight, I want to introduce and again help prepare you and me and my family for Advent 2020. Now, the themes of Advent, I think 2020 have set up, as I said, well, the notions of hope in travail, of light in darkness, of deliverance in the midst of suffering. Those themes that are part of Advent are very much lived realities for many people. And so tonight, when I give some suggested resources and some focal practices and some things to maybe bring into your Advent to help prepare the way of the Lord in your hearts and minds, I'm aware that some of you are feeling overwhelmed and tired. And so tonight, one of the first things I just simply want to say is you've got permission to do very little in Advent. If you need to rest, rest. But in this season, I think there's also an opportunity to draw close to Christ. So I'd like to start by introducing what Advent is. And I'm turning, and many of you who know me, I'm turning to some of my favorite writers and poets. First, the Bard of the North and the Anglican poet laureate, I suppose, Steve Bell, the Bard of the North from Winnipeg, a fellow Anglican and wonderful songwriter and writer, and his friend and my friend, Malcolm Guite, a wonderful poet from England. So I'd like to read from Steve's excellent book, part of a series in the Christian year, the Pilgrim Year. This one is Volume 1, Advent. And so first, Steve actually quotes Malcolm. And this is what Malcolm writes about Advent. Advent, a holy season in which we connect again with our inconsolable longing, as C.S. Lewis called it, our yearning for the one who is to come and is also mysteriously the one who has already come. Come as a child, come as a fellow sufferer, come as Savior, and yet whose coming already achieved, we hold at bay from ourselves, so that we have to learn afresh each year, even each day, how to let Him come to us again. That's the short introduction to what Advent is. But Steve expands on it in a way that resonates a lot to me and maybe to some of you. And this is what Steve writes about Advent. When I started to attend to the Advent season, I was surprised at the themes present in the ancient writings. Traditionally, Advent was not the giddy season of festive parties and garish decor we have come to know. The more rooted Advent tradition was a preparation for the return of Christ, not a mere preparation for Christmas celebrations. Indeed, there was an element of festive joy, but it was also a sober season, almost Lentish, that began with sustained attention to our deepest longings and the assumptions, valid or vain, which those longings might indicate. It was a time of penitent reflection about the many inordinate attachments and affections we have given ourselves to, those ill-discerned commitments that prevent us from fully attaching to Christ. Advent was a season to reflect on the rich spiritual metaphor of motherhood or spousal maternity, which reveals the deepest truth about the mystery of the human person, that we were created to receive and house heaven in our womb and bear it forth for the sake of the world. The Christ child doesn't merely come to us, but through us. Advent was also a time to reflect on the ancient names of Christ: Emmanuel, Wisdom, Dayspring, Majestic Lord, Root, Key, Desire of the Nations, as memorialized in the tradition of the O antiphons. So I think Malcolm and Steve really do an excellent job of telling us what Advent is in terms of its thematic arch, and also in terms of some of the things that we can focus on at the beginning of this new year. Now here is just going to be some practices, some focal points that I'm going to share from the story of our family's traditions. My children, they're all 3 in their 20s now, but these are some of the things that we use with them to help bring them to attention, to help them observe and learn about the coming of Christ and his coming again through this season of Advent. So here's a few things to suggest. Again, take them on board if they're helpful. If they aren't, don't feel like you have to incorporate any of them. But we'll also, particularly to the parish, we'll be sending you out a variety of resources that you can use in your own homes, either as an individual or as a part of a family, to help keep the focus during this Advent season. So first, a couple of focal points that we would always have in our home. The first one that we have here is our Advent wreath with the 4 Advent candles that will be lit. And our kids used to anticipate their turn when they would light the Advent candle for the first Sunday of Advent, and then the second, third, fourth, and then the Christ candle that would be lit in the center. So the 3 purple candles and the 1 pink candle, but we would usually start here with the first Sunday of Advent, then light both of them on the second Sunday of Advent, and then the third one on Gaudete, or Let Us Rejoice, the third Sunday in Advent, and then the fourth Sunday in Advent. And then we would have a candle that would burn down the days of the month of December as well. And then when it came to Christmas Eve and the beginning of the 12 days of Christmas, we would replace the center candle with a Christ candle that would be lit throughout Christmastide. The Advent wreath is, again, it's a symbol that's one of the stock symbols of Advent, of light coming into darkness, and particularly for those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere, this is an important theme that we can relate to as the days grow shorter, darker, and colder. So the Advent wreath with the Advent candles, we also have short little readings that go with each Sunday in Advent that, again, our children could take turns with, and we'll be providing links to some resources that you can use, again, individually or with others for each Sunday in the 4 Sundays of Advent. So that's one focal point that would always be there in our home. The other one is the focal point of the creche. Now, it's not obviously like the Griswold's creche. It's a little more sober and maybe a little bit more serene. But for us, my dad built us this kind of version of the creche using some old wood from a barn. And my wife had collected different figurines over the years, and Darlene would place them. And so we would have Mary and Joseph, but we wouldn't have them starting out in the creche. They would travel throughout the season of Advent, and we would place them quite a ways from the creche. And then throughout Advent, Mary and Joseph would make their way with their donkey and until they would finally on Christmas Eve arrive in the creche itself. So it was again a way of reminding our children of the journey, which is Advent, and the journey, which is the Christian life as well. And so we would move figurines closer and closer to the creche as Christmas came. And then, of course, when Epiphany would come on the 6th of January, that's when the Magi would appear as well. And they would also be making their journey closer and closer in different locations in the house, and the children would always love moving them to newer and closer locations to the creche. But again, it provided some focal points of the themes and the purpose that reminded our family of the story of Advent and as we move into Christmas. So those are a couple focal points. In terms of some of the practices that we would inhabit as well, for us, we're big readers, and so there's just loads of wonderful resources that you can use. And I just want to flag up a couple more in addition to Steve Bell's book. But one of them, and as our children were at different ages, we would use different resources for them. But these aren't just for children, but you might want to think about them to be used in your homes. One by our dear friend Eugene Peterson. He wrote this wonderful story called The Christmas Troll. I remember him reading it just from page proofs to our young children when we visited them in Montana years ago in the middle of the summer. But this is his book, The Christmas Troll, which is a picture book and a wonderful story written by Eugene and beautifully illustrated, that tells the story of two children learning about what true giving and receiving is about. The Christmas Troll. Again, pretty appropriate for younger children. When children get a little bit older, you got to introduce them to some of the classics like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Again, a wonderful novelist and writer, as many of you know. I'll be reading this again myself this Advent season, so it's not just for children, but it is just designed to be read aloud in a home setting. So when things are quieter this year and you have opportunities to be with your family or with your children, this is a great book to read. Another wonderful children's book that isn't just for children is by the famous philosopher Jostein Gaarder, the author of Sophie's World, who wrote this story called The Christmas Mystery, which is a traveling narrative that goes through all the days of December leading up to Christmas Day. And again, this is probably suitable for anybody maybe age 7 and up. But a wonderful, wonderful book to read with others. So those are some of the practices, because we like books. Maybe some of you aren't bookish people. I'd commend to you some of the excellent playlists that are available on different platforms to listen to. Just search Advent playlist, and you'll come up with some real wonderful music and Advent songs that aren't Christmas songs yet, but that are Advent songs. And there's so many of them. Of course, the classic one, O Come, Emmanuel, but that build on those themes. For those of you who are maybe not as introverted and are craving the connection with others, I'd encourage you to avail yourself of some of the technology that allows us to still stay connected when we have to be more physically distanced in our homes. So of course, have dinner parties together using technology to connect you. In England, some bishops have put together something called Dinner at the Vicarage, and so once a week they send out recipes ahead that people then can prepare together and then eat the meal together, and they pair them with various beverages and wines. And the bishops have also written some essays that go along with each week's theme. So Dinner at the Vicarage. Search that if you want to kind of have dinner parties together with some of your friends or family members that are distant from you. Again, one of the just simplest things to do though is just pick up the phone and phone somebody. If you need to connect that way, that's a really good practice to do. So those are some of my suggestions for you. I hope some of them are helpful. Again, we're going to provide some others through the website for the parish. But again, give yourself permission to lean into these Advent themes and also to embrace some of the opportunities that this particular Advent 2020, allow us to welcome into our lives. It's not all bad news. In fact, the promise of Advent is that all shall be well. And so I'd like to just finish by reading the lyrics to what I think is going to be the Advent anthem in our home, and we'll play it often, is this wonderful piece by the group called Ordinary Time. What a great name for a musical group, but they have this song that's called All Shall Be Well, a song for Advent. And these are the lyrics from the group Ordinary Time. He called him into the night, said, Abram, count the stars so bright. Through you true peace will come to every tribe and tongue. Though no one knows my name, blessing is coming all the same, and all shall be well. Now many years went by of withered hopes, unanswered cries, till one night a virgin heard a cry that broke the silence of God. That star above them bright had shone for Abram that night. This child so weak, so small, brings peace and rest to all, and all shall be well. The years unending seem here and this in-between. Peace on earth, God's will for men, seems like it came and went. The wars, they linger on. The darkness overcomes. We need not stars, but sun. Break in, O coming one. Sometimes we cannot tell that you will make all well. And all shall be well. All shall be well. Again, look up that song, Ordinary Time, All Shall Be Well. That's a good theme to rest on and again to lean into this Advent season. So from my home and my family to yours, bless you and a blessed Advent to you all. Bye-bye.